What's going on, you guys? This is Boxingwave. Welcome back to the channel. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't. We have a great fight this weekend. In fact, we have a great schedule coming up in this November. Boxing's been kind of slow since Terrence Crawford beat Canelo Alvarez. Okay, we had a couple good fights here and there, but things are going to really start picking up the month of November, and I look forward to it. Because I want to go back to doing breakdowns and not just gossiping over fighters and stuff like that. We did have a good heavyweight fight last weekend between Joseph Parker and Fabio Wardley, but this is when things going to start really picking up from here. All right. This fight between Virgil Ortiz Jr. and Erickson Lubin is going to be this Saturday on November 8th. It's going to be on dazn. And I believe the fight is in Texas, all right, in Virgil Ortiz's backyard. Erickson Lubin he's from Florida, okay? But it's a good fight nonetheless. It's going to be at 54, and this is going to be for the WBC interim title, okay? WBC full champ is Sebastian Fundora, all right? So where do we begin? I mean, I'm going to start off by saying this. This is going to be Virgil's fifth fight, I believe, at 54. Right, when he moved up, he had a couple tune-up fights. Okay, we know he had some issues, health issues down at 47. He was supposed to fight Stanionis at one point. I think at one point Stanionis got hurt. He got injured. He pulled out. Virgil pulled out. He had issues, but now he's at 54. First couple fights at 54, got some early KOs, I believe, in the first round. And then the last two fights that he's had are the only two fights that Virgil Ortiz has gone to different distance since he's been pro. Okay, he's 27 years old now. He has 23 professional fights with 21 knockouts, no losses, no draws. All right, but these last two fights he's coming off of has been two of his toughest fights in his professional career. The only two fights he's gone the distance. One against Israel Madrimov and one against Sergey Bohchuk. All right, the Bohchuk fight, I actually thought Bohchuk edged the fight with the knockdowns, but I remember there was a big debate after that fight. A lot of people thought Virgil edged it out because of the flash knockdowns and stuff like that, but it was a really, really close fight regardless. All right. So that's where we're at with him. Okay, he's as far as the sizes and stuff, he's slightly shorter than Erickson Lubin. He has a shorter reach than Erickson Lubin. Ortiz is the orthodox fighter. He's the righty here, and Lubin is a southpaw. Let's talk a little bit about Lubin. Lubin, he's 30 years old. Like I said, he's a few inches longer in reach advantage. He's fighting a little longer, and I think he's one of the most experienced, if not the most experienced fighter that Virgil Ortiz has taken up to this point, in my opinion. I also think that he's probably the most well-rounded fighter that Ortiz has fought at this point. I think there's other fighters that Ortiz fought that had greater strengths. But as far as the full package, I would say Erickson Lubin, from a technical level, might be the most well-rounded. I'm not saying he's the best. I'm saying he's the most well-rounded, all right? Lubin's been in there with several champions. He's been in there, or a few champions. He's been in there with Jamel Charlo, where he was stopped. In very early in fight, I actually thought that, I remember doing a video for that fight, I thought it was too soon for Lubin to step up to Charlo, especially because at the time, Charlo was just getting, hitting his peak, you know what I mean? He was getting closer and closer to his prime and learning about how to really be a puncher. Lubin at the time, who was a hot prospect at the time, thought it was too much of a jump in opposition, and he paid for it in the first round. He then went on to lose to Sebastian Fundora, which was one of the fights of the year that year, which was a phenomenal fight. But I just think Lubin, who was stopped in that fight, just took the wrong approach. I recently rewatched a little bit of it the other day just to confirm what I remember about the fight. And what I got out of that fight is that Lubin had the wrong approach. I think Lubin, and when he's being on the back foot, and when he's using his movement and he's being patient, that's the best version of Erickson Lubin. I think when Lubin is looking to try to go to war with you, even though he has power, I think that's not really his best approach. I think he needs to fight on a back foot, fight off the ropes. Used to be more defensive, be more of a trap setup, and be more of a counter puncher type of guy. So he's been in there with him, and then he's been in there with Jason Rosario, who was probably on a downslope at that point, but he stopped him. Good win. And he's been in a very controversial win against Jesus Ramos. Okay, which a lot of people felt that Ramos won. I was kind of leaning towards a draw. I actually predicted Ramos to win, but I thought it was kind of a bit of a draw. I really didn't think either one did enough. I had rewatched it the other day, and I thought Ramos was definitely winning the earlier rounds, but the activity and his volume and the punches landed. But I think he definitely slowed down in the later half of the fight. And then Erickson Lubin took over and was very, very accurate in that fight. Very accurate. So I didn't think either one of them won. I think a lot of people thought it was a robbery. I didn't think it was a robbery. But I wasn't mad at people that thought that Ramos won the fight, edged the fight. I could see Ramos winning the fight like maybe 7 rounds to 5. All right. And then he took a 2-year layoff. And, that could be an issue because he recently fought Holmes early this year in May. But, he had went like over a year and a half he went like 20 months without a fight, 18, 20 months without a fight. And, Holmes, who, I know that was like they got some history together and all that. And Holmes was a good boxer, tall, rangy fighter. I don't think he was on a level of some of the other guys that, Lubin has already faced. And stylistically, this is nothing like Vergil Ortiz. So let's get into that. Like, as far as styles and matchups and stuff and experience, I think, again, I think they're both experienced. Erickson's been fighting longer, but I mean, Virgil's been in there with some good comp. He's been in there, like with the guys I named before. At 47, he's been in there with Igor Kavalauskas. He's been in there with Maurice Hooker. He's been gradually getting better between 140, 47, 54. So, I think when it comes to the experience, they both have it. I just think that it's all about the styles. And when it comes to the matchups between these two, first thing I do when I do these breakdowns is try to find opponents with similar styles, especially with the stances as first. Lubin being a southpaw, he's fighting righties all the time. But I couldn't find anyone like I couldn't. There's no one that fights exactly like Virgil Ortiz. Believe it or not, I think Ramos fights the most like Virgil Ortiz. Is that Ramos is a southpaw too. But stylistically, I think he brings close to the same amount of intensity that Virgil brings. Virgil is like a little bit more aggressive, but I think Ramos is probably bigger and he is bigger. He's bigger and he's probably a little bit more durable. You know what I mean? But that's the closest style wise, when it came to Virgil, he doesn't have much experience fighting the southpaws in the pro fights. Michael McKinson was the last one, and I can't compare McKinson to Erickson Lubin. You know what I mean? I couldn't really do that. Madrimov fights. He can fight as a southpaw. He's a switcher, but he's like one of those constant switching guys. You know what I mean? He's just constantly switching and stuff like that. There's not really any styles there that I can really compare when it comes to the two of them. I don't think Ericson Lubin fought anyone just like exactly like Virgil or really that close to it. And the same with Virgil. I can't say the same for Lubin, can't really compare. But anyway, I think it's gonna be a fun fight. I think I've never seen a boring Virgil Ortiz fight, whether he's dominant, whether it's close. His fights are normally good because of his style. He's coming forward, front foot heavy, popping a lot of jabs, throwing combinations, attacking the body, power punches, good counters, and he's pretty athletic, got You know, um, got good angles too. I think he's pretty good. And with Erickson Lubin, I think he welcomes the aggression. I think he's better when he's being on the back foot and waiting for the aggressive fighter to come forward to him. I think that's when he does his best work. I was talking a little bit about the Sebastian Fedora fight. Man, I think that in a way, that first round was the round that he was supposed to continue fighting. But we also didn't know how good Fedora up into that fight. We didn't know how good Fedora was on the inside, being those long, long arms. You wouldn't think he was so comfortable on the inside, but he was. And Lubin, who's a pretty solid inside fighter himself, made a mistake at sitting in the pocket and staying in the pocket with him. He should have used his movement and worked behind the counter. You know what I mean? He didn't really do that. He sat in there and went to war with him, man. I bring these fights up specifically because I think it will tell the key differences. I think Lubin is a heavy underdog for this fight. I don't think he should be. I'm not really sure if Golden Boy had planned to take a tune-up. I hope they're not looking at this fight as a tune-up. And I'm only saying that because after the Madrimov and the Madrimov, who was the other guy he fought, Bohachuk fights, they were like, they're going to take, a easier fight next. I remember I remember it being said, maybe not directly from Virgil, but either his team, someone from his team, or maybe I think Oscar said it or tweeted it. They were looking to take an easier fight. I hope they're not looking at this fight as an easier fight, because I don't think this is an easier fight at all. You know what I mean? I just think that they're looking at the knockouts of Lubin, because Lubin's only lost twice, but he's, when you look at Lubin, I see the fact that he's been a little inactive, even though he fought recently. Just once in the past 2 years is not the greatest as far as in activity. They're looking at the losses and that he was stopped in both. So maybe they're looking at it like, there's potential for Virgil to overwhelm him. But I think when it comes to Lubin, I think it really depends. I think I want to throw the Jamal Charlo loss out of there because he was a lot less experienced at that time. That was his first real opponent. But when you look at the Fedora fight and you look at everything else, it really depends, excuse me, what kind of fight he chooses to take. And if he's going to be the very patient fighter that I'm expecting him to be, because he's very experienced, and I think this turns into one of those fights where I think there is some potential for Lubin to win, because what he's doing in the fight is a little different from what Virgil is used to dealing with. You had Madrimov, who was a freak athlete, great cardio, great movement, overly fainting and stuff like that, but not enough punches thrown. Same with the Terrence Crawford fight. Like, Madrimov does a lot of things to throw you off your rhythm, but it was not enough offense from him, and I think there was a period in the fight where Madrimov tried to, go punch to punch with Ortiz, and that's when Ortiz took the fight over. You know what I mean? I think with Lubin is going to give you that movement. He's going to be probing, he's going to be feinting, he's going to be jabbing. He's going to display some good defense. But he's not going to overly do it like Madrimov. He's going to let his hands go a little bit more. You know what I mean? And Bohachuk can't compare. Again, I don't want to go through every name, but what I will say, as far as from a technical level, I think that Erickson Lubin is way much more of closer than of an underdog. I'm cool with him being the underdog. He should probably be the underdog. But as far as the gap between it, I thought I saw he was like a plus 1,300 if he wins on points, plus 600 if he wins straight up. That's too much. That's too much. I think that's way too much. And I'll say it here. I think that I think the money, if I'm gonna put money down, I think I'm gonna put money on Lubin to pull off the upset, because I think that's the only money that makes sense, regardless if you think Virgil wins or not. He should be the favorite to win, but at the same time, he's too much of a favorite to win. I think it should be a lot closer. Um, especially because Lubin is technically good and he can fight 12 rounds with, the pressure. He can do it. I've seen him do it. All right. So overall, when it comes to Virgil, apply the pressure, use the jab, throw those combinations, try to force Lubin to get in a dogfight with you. I think if the fight is close range, even though I think Lubin could hold his own on the inside, I would give Ortiz that advantage because he's used to being a dog fight. He's used to just being in the pocket, hitting your body, hitting you all over the place, and just outworking you. I think that's where he does his best work. Lubin is pretty good defensively in close range, and he could take body shots well and everything like that. He uses his elbows, he goes into the high guard. But unlike Ramos, I think Virgil Ortiz is better at taking advantage of that high guard, a little bit better than Ramos is. You know what I mean? Those uppercuts through the guard that Ramos did land, you're going to see that from Virgil. But I think Virgil's a little bit better at forcing you to drop those hands and punching around the guard. And I just think Virgil's better at that. So if Lubin spends too much time on the ropes, that might be a disadvantage for him. You know what I mean? Now the thing is, Lubin's a good counter puncher, and he's a puncher. He's a boxer puncher. I don't think people give him enough credit because they're looking at his losses, and they're looking at the Ramos fight. You got to remember, his face was pretty puffed up, pretty swollen after that fight. So even if you think Ramos won the fight, you got to look at the physical damage that was there, the accurate punches, the clean short counters on the inside. You got to look at that. So Virgil is a guy that usually gets, even when in his wins, he gets physically, you could see it in his face. He gets busted up in the face pretty bad. And yeah, you got to remember that. And not only that, Virgil could be hurt. We haven't really seen him get knocked down outside of the what's his name? I keep Bohachuk fight. The Bohachuk fight, yeah, he got dropped a couple of times in that fight, but he's been hurt. He can get hurt. You know what I mean? He's been hurt by, Kavalaskis. He hit him with a good shot there. I don't think, even with all the pressure, Virgil is a guy that can be hurt, but he's good, quick recovery guy. Virgil gets hit with a clean shot, though. He has to learn how to calm down. Okay, he gets hit with a good shot. He comes straight at you. He wants to return the favor. He got to fight smart here. Make sure he doesn't fight reckless, walk into something heavy while just trying to overly be aggressive or prove that he's not hurt. You get a good shot, tie up, back off a little bit. It's nothing embarrassing about it. You don't have to prove to the crowd that you're not hurt, or your opponent that you're not hurt. Take a good shot, back off. Right now, he's young. He'd be fired up. You hit him with a good shot, he wants to return the favor, And that could be a dangerous thing against Lubin, especially the version of Lubin is right now. A lot more seasoned, a lot more relaxed in there, even with the pressure. So look, I'm saying all of this because this is a good fight. I think this is a good fight, and I think this is a fight that Lubin can win. I'm not expecting a knockout from either, and I'm going to explain why. Virgil couldn't knock out his last two opponents. Not saying that that's a knock on him. But what I'm saying is, being at 54, now that you're fighting the top guys, top 10 guys at 54, 3 fights in a row now, It's going to be harder to do it. There's your third division up. The more you're going up, it's going to be harder to catch some knockouts. It is what it is, you know? So with that being said, I'm not expecting a knockout from Virgil. I think even though Lubin's been stopped twice, I think he's gotten more of his experience, his survival tactics, you know. I like to see him, you know, go the distance. If someone gets stopped, though, I'm expecting it to be Lubin. If there is a stoppage, I think it's more likely for Lubin to get stopped. I think Lubin has a great chance of outboxing Virgil and controlling Virgil and even turning his aggression against him. All right. So when the money, I say take the chance and go with Lubin. But overall, I think Virgil's aggression, his volume, you know, him fighting in the home. And listen, politics is politics, you know, fighting in his backyard, you know, fighting on a Golden Boy card, you know, being the undefeated fighter. I just think that this is a close fight, which is a very good chance that it might be. If it's anything as close as the Ramos fight, I'm expecting Virgil to win, you know, whether he stops Lubin because he overwhelms him or if it goes to points. I think the likeliness is you gotta go with Virgil. You know what I mean? You just gotta go with him. So yeah, I think Virgil is gonna win the fight. All right. I think he's gonna win. But I'm putting money on Lubin. I think I like that plus 1,300. I like that. And I think Lubin has a great chance of getting it. Not 50-50, but I say 55-45 chance. Similar to what I said last week. I think I had Parker, even though it was wrong. I was leaning towards Parker to win, but I thought it was closer than what people were saying. I thought it was 55-45, and I look at it like this too. I think Lubin has a great chance of neutralizing Virgil a little bit, but also landing clean flush counters too. But I think that Virgil, with his volume and his pressure, he might eventually be too much for Lubin, you know, and he can win by stoppage or by points. All right. So anyway, that's my pick, man. Virgil to win on decision, but I'm putting some money down on Lubin to win on decision. That plus 1,300. All right. If I change anything, I don't think I will. But as far as the betting, I like plus 1,300. There's no money in Virgil winning at all, in my opinion, unless you're going with the rounds or under, up, you know, over or under. I didn't check all that. But what I'll do is I'll screenshot my bet before the fight. All right. I'll do that to my final thing. But that's why I'm looking at it. All right. Anyway, great fight. Undercard is a little bit underwhelming, but thank God this is not a pay-per-view because that's all we've been getting lately. All right. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.